As a real estate investor and a project manager, I've gone through numerous retransformations. And I think that I have finally figured out what makes the best contractor, at least in the systems that we run. But who knows? I thought I've figured that out before. This latest iteration of what I believe to be the best contractor came from a retransformation after a literal close to arms experience with a contractor where I had to send people home from work and sit at the office by myself because we were kind of concerned that this guy would be coming up to the office packing heat because we had looked up his criminal record and found out that that was a way that he had dealt with things before. And, I'll come back to that story, but it hasn't always been like that. When I first started out as a real estate investor, I came from a corporate background. And so I kind of thought that that's what I would be looking for in contractors. And I actually remember leaving the corporate world thinking, gosh, I just want to work with people who are tough and want to actually work hard. I was a little bit burnt out by the things that I had to deal with in the corporate world. And so I came with the mindset of the corporate background and I was trying to bring that into contracting. I figured that if I could, or not necessarily contracting, but real estate investing, I figured that if I could have similar success as I did there in my own business, then that would be a really good situation for me. Turns out there were a lot of new lessons to learn when I was out by myself. But anyway, so I go into the contracting with that methodology and I call up contractors and I had bought this triplex and I call up contractors to get them out to a job site to bid it. And I wanted to just trust them to do their thing. I wanted them to come in and tell me what the best thing for them to do would be. And I guess I just assumed that they were the professional, so they would automatically understand what my vision was as an investor, and also that they would build a scope of work that best suited those needs. And fast forward to now, I think about how stupid and naive that was. But I guess I didn't realize at the time there are so many different types of construction. There's high end renovations, there's commercial work, there's commercial renovations, commercial new builds, there's new builds for houses, there's additions, there are the investor grade rehabs like we do on these crappy houses that honestly none of these guys want to be in the first place. And I guess I thought that they were all the same. Construction is construction. And so any general contractor, which is what I was hiring at the time, not necessarily what I suggest we do moving forward. I'm more of the manager, manage it yourself, MYI structure than just going out and hiring a general contractor. You might do that later in your career. But anyway, at that time, I thought that I would go out, hire a general contractor, and all of them were created equal. I just needed to find the guy that I meshed the best with. And yeah, that's not the truth at all. There are just the different types of construction might as well be different industries completely. And so there's no way that that guy who, I guess looking back on it, was probably more of a high end renovation type of contractor, but no way that he was going to understand what I wanted, how I wanted to build a scope of work to maximize profit. And truly at the time, I had no clue that's what I wanted. That had been that got developed over years of mistakes on, how I go and build a scope of work and what I actually want out of a project. But anyhow, this guy, who I call that type of contractor the professional. So he was just like what you imagine on HGTV. He came, had his collared shirt, came with his clipboard. He was asking me what I wanted to do, and I was telling him all the things that I envisioned for the property, even though I didn't really understand at the time. And he whipped up a price for me. And, truly that guy was not even on the job site anymore. He just kind of ran his business through other people, did probably what you would like to do or what I'm trying to show you guys to do, how to manage multiple other contractors. And anyhow, the project finally got finished and it cost way too much money. And he did things that, looking back, just don't make any sense for the type of property that I was buying. And actually, looking back on it now, I realize that the things that he did were the things that were the easiest and most profitable for him to do. And so, like, crazy things like the appliances got put in really early in a project, but I can see now why he would have done that, because he would have gotten paid his cut over the top of the appliances, and all he had to do was click a button and there they are. And it was other things like that. All the jobs on that project that would have required true problem solving, and probably some of his better contractors, they didn't get done. It was things like painting, that got done because you can find all kinds of contractors to do painting, and some flooring got done, and so on and so forth. But you get the idea. That's the professional. And, I way overpaid for that project. Didn't get anything, didn't get near what I had envisioned done with the project. And truly, I didn't even know what I envisioned. So finding the right type of contractor that understands what you're actually trying to do would have stopped me and said, "Hey man, why do you want those things done? This is what's going to maximize your profit." That's the kind of guy you're looking for. That is really a unicorn. And so you're going to have to develop that sense for yourself. And that's why we're doing all of this. So, anyway, I understood that that wasn't going to work out for me. And so I then went looking for like a true craftsman type of guy. I came from a small town, and so like I was imagining the types of guys that I grew up with, or the um, type of guys in the town. The wear a flannel shirt, the Al Borland, the Bob Vila type of guy that kind of knew how to do everything. This I call the craftsman. And I found those guys. They're certainly out there. And when I first started working with that type of guy, so on a specific project, it actually worked out really well. They did a very nice job. Wasn't like the fastest ever, but they did a really nice job. Everything looked really nice and clean cut. But then I moved to a more classic investor grade renovation that would be something that we would be more inclined to buy. That first project was kind of a cosmetic rehab in a nicer area, whereas the second one, I mean, basically his eyes looked like fried eggs when he saw it, because it was not something that the craftsman would want to deal with. The craftsman really does make nice things, and it's not that there's not a place for that type of contractor, but for the most part in these investor grade rehabs that you buy some bombed out houses, these guys who want to do higher craftsmanship type of work just generally don't fit for us. And so it was back to the drawing board. And this is where I really spent a lot of my time. And this is where you would find cheaper guys to do the work. So I remember finding this guy who, gosh, I can't even remember exactly how I ran into him. I think he responded to an ad I had out on Facebook. Maybe I found him on Craigslist. That would be more likely the place where I would find this type of contractor. But I had him come up to this six-plex apartment that I had just bought. And, it was 3 stories high and it was brick. And I had been getting bids to paint the outside because the brick was in pretty rough shape. And anyway, people are coming in at what you would expect, $10,000 or over because you got to get a lift in there. And it was right on a major street. And anyway, this guy comes in and he says $800 to paint the whole thing, material included. And I'm like, yeah, sign me up. And that's the type of contractor I'm talking about here. So I spent like the next few years of my career dealing with these types of guys. And it's like, it always gets me because, well, there was the $10,000 bid versus the $800 bid. Of course, that sounds really sweet, but it's not so sweet when, just real quick, I did not actually hire him to do that job. That I knew was too good to be true. And but other jobs that I did hire this specific person on, actually, I mean, they'd get the job done, but it was always like every time Friday came around, it was some kind of sob story about how they needed to get paid because of this reason, that reason, and the other reason. They needed me to pay a little bit in advance. And like at the beginning, that would actually get me. I'd feel bad for the situation, but then I'd pay them and then I wouldn't see them for a while again. The job sites would start smelling weird, i.e., they were smoking something on the job sites that made them work very fast. Anyhow, they, yeah, it was always had to pay them early because something, whatever story. And then, the jobs that they were hired to do would get done, but they're always like not quite done. And then down the road, stuff would come up that they had done that they hadn't done right. And it was just always that back and forth. And so then, finally I came to the realization that for one, I spend so much time chasing these guys around, so much time chasing these guys around. And then the extra money that I had to spend to get, to fix the mistakes they made down the road when, those guys fell off the face of the earth and I was left holding the bag. By the time all that was said and done, I don't think they were actually any cheaper. They just caused me more headaches. And so that comes back to there's always a price for construction, the market price for construction. And one way or another, you're going to pay for it. Even if you don't pay for it in money, you pay for it in stress or time or bandwidth, whatever it might be. And so finally, I dropped these guys and understood that that wasn't the way to go. So after this came the next phase of my career when I actually personally decided that I needed to really create the framework in which, that's the Larossa systems that it has evolved into. But I needed to create a framework on how to manage these guys. I needed to um, then I could expand. That's what I was thinking is that if I could create a framework, I could just throw contractors into this depth chart. And, instead of being able to do 10 projects at a time, I could do 60, 70 projects at a time. I was thinking, the Walmart of contractors is what I could be. I could, or the Costco, and I could do more volume. And because of the volume, I could squeeze the prices. And that's what I was shooting to do. I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about that and then actually putting it into action. And, I did get there where we did 40, 50, 60, 70 projects at one time. And, like some of them were smaller projects. And I mean, we had so many contractors that we were running through. I mean, hundreds of 1099s got thrown out and then, or got sent out. And we grew an internal crew of, at one point, it was over 30 guys. And so we had to manage all of that, the hiring and training and such of the guys. Not that we managed it all that well, but then we had to constantly be recruiting these subcontractors and then managing the subcontractors on the job sites. And, that's what I believe happens to this type of contractor that I call the grower, which was me at the time, where you're trying to scale the business faster than you can actually manage it, because managing people in this business is a nightmare sometimes. It takes so much bandwidth to keep these things on track. And eventually I had to abandon the plan and squeeze down. I'm actually not sure if it is possible to grow like that in this game. Of course, I decided that that was not going to be the path for me, is to try to become the Costco of contractors. I decided instead I was really going to focus on uh, doing just this, making courses and content for other investors like me, sharing some of the big mistakes, just like that one that I made. And so at that point, I downsized to where now we might do, you know, 20 projects at a time. And we have like a close knit group of contractors. We finally figured out what makes the best contractor, which is what this podcast is about. And we're going to get there. But first, I want to talk about the different types of employees that we went through when we had the 30 plus man internal crew. And this is also something that I think you'll go through as an investor hiring either an internal crew or other contractors. Because some contractors kind of work like an internal crew, even though they might not be W-2. And so you'll still deal with where you're really dealing with a guy one on one. The first internal crew type of guy, once again, could be a contractor that's like this. I call the go getter. And this guy is like the guy that's eager to please. He is really trying to be helpful and good and do the best. But, the problem with a guy like this is they are very scared to make a mistake. And so what ends up happening is, I mean, they're like, I remember getting a phone call about like raking a yard. And I'm like, gosh, can't you just figure it out for yourself? Even if you make the mistake, it's okay, mess it up and we'll figure out how to rake the yard better next time. And, eventually I realized that this type of guy is just an absolute bandwidth suck. I spend more time on the phone trying to tell him what to do the right way, to give him some confidence, then actually I could do it faster if I just went and did it myself and still do the other things that I was doing. And then we move on to a different type of employee or contractor, which I call the rookie, which this one is pretty self-explanatory. But this is so I thought that what I needed to do is hire the right guy, maybe that didn't have the talent, the skills, and experience yet, but had the right mindset and the right attitude, the right work ethic. And so I went out interviewing people like that, and maybe from different industries. But, my thought at the time is that, a problem solver is a problem solver, and that's what we're out doing. And so I just need somebody that's got a brain that works right and a good work ethic to back it up, and I can teach them everything that they need to know. And that is a good idea in theory. The issue is that there's actually a lot that goes into, especially being a problem solver. Now, this may have worked for if it was specific trades you were hiring these people for. Like if you wanted to hire a guy to do nothing but paint, then yeah, you could probably teach a guy to do nothing but paint. And then, but you don't have paint jobs going on all day, every day, especially if you're a real estate investor. You have a paint job and then you'll have a paint job when the next paint job for your next house comes about. But you're probably doing only one or two at a time. And so you couldn't have an employee that did nothing but paint. You need a guy that can kind of do everything. And so to teach somebody this or wait for them to learn it on their own, it costs a lot in mistakes and go backs, as we would call them. And eventually they would learn. But the thing is, a lot of times when they finally learned, because you're overpaying them for their skills at the beginning while you're teaching them. And then uh, finally they learn, and then they're like, well, I'm going to go get a job at a commercial outfit or whatever. Or they get burnt out finally. And so you never, I say never, obviously there are caveats here. And like we have a great internal crew. Uh, but for the most part, what would happen is you would never actually get to, you would never get the advantage of bringing somebody in and training them up, because by the time they got to the part where they're up, they'd be gone. And so it was always just sunk cost. And the final type of people that we had hired is one that I call the union steward. And this, so after going through the rookie, I thought, well, I need to hire somebody that's got like true blue experience. They've been doing this forever, and um, they really know what they're doing, and I can just send them out somewhere and they'll fix the problem. And this is also great in theory. However, it turns out that a lot of times, if uh, a lot of those types of guys that we would hire would spend more time. They may have known what to do, but they would spend more time leaning over their shovel trying to teach other people what to do than actually doing it themselves. And there was always, and they didn't really like being on the investor grade rehab types of jobs, and honestly, just not my type of guy. It'd make me angry, more frustrated, even if they did get stuff done. Just that knowing that they're out there taking down the level of the workhorses that were on staff, and so that just didn't work out for me. That's the union steward. All right, now the dirty contractor. This is where we started from. So I did a whole video on the different types of dirty contractors, which you should check out. But lots of different tricks out there that contractors do. And rewinding to the beginning of this podcast, the guy who, yeah, truly, we thought he was going to come up to the office, and we thought we had to uh, definitely needed to send the guys home that were working in the office, guys and gals home that were working in the office, for concerned that he might come up there locked and loaded. And so and there are, this particular guy was doing a job, and it was a paint job. And so, we also did a YouTube video here where I kind of put together two different stories from two different contractors who it was similar. But the one that happened, the most recent one that I'm thinking of, is it was a painter, and he was painting a building for us. And, it was the classic, can I get a little bit of payment? We've done this much. Can I get some payment? And I'm like, I'll give you some payment, but I can't pay you ahead. Otherwise, I can't get you back to finish the job. And I'm kind of afraid that you're front loading all the easy work and not the harder work. Because this was a commercial building. There were some dents in the building that needed to be bondoed and then sanded out and then painted over. But then he went and like painted the whole thing, and then he was going to come back and do the bondo. But he wanted, he was trying to make the argument that, well, I've done most of it because I painted it. And I'm like, well, it looks like you've done most of it, but I know that the hardest work is yet to be done. And so I'm really not going to pay you ahead that much, man. And then, so I'd give him a little bit, and then, he'd do a little bit more, and then he'd want more payment. And, it was always like, man, how many times am I going to have to check your work? Cause it's always like, half-assed. He'd say he was done, and then, it wasn't really done. He still had more to do. It didn't look good. I remember the conversation that I had with the guy, which is like classic for crappy contractors. Is I remember when I was a kid, my dad would come down to my room and he'd ask me to clean my room. Like I was a pretty messy kid, and so yeah, he'd ask me to clean my room, and so like whatever, I would finally do it. And there'd be like a string of crap like clothes and toys or whatever around the perimeter of the bedroom. I'd just clean up the middle, and then I'd yell at the old man, and he'd come down and be like, that's not clean. You need to like actually clean it. There's stuff around the corners and so on and so forth. And so then, I would like take some of that stuff and like pile it up in my closet. And then, hey, Dad, I'm done with cleaning my room. Come check it out. And he'd open the closet door and like, hey, no, this is not clean. And the still stuff around the corners. And eventually this would go on and on and on and on until finally it was actually clean. Not actually clean, just finally, I think what happened is he probably got tired of walking down the hall and, uh, going through this back and forth that, just whatever, it's good enough. I'll accept it. And so, I was telling this contractor that story, and I'm like, dude, I remember being a kid that the thing is, I didn't care. I didn't want to clean my room. I didn't give a crap about it. I was just trying to do the absolute minimum to, for him to get tired enough to say, my room is cleaned. And so, hey, dude, clean your effing room. That's when you'll get paid. And that's really what, I guess probably set our relationship off in the wrong direction. But anyway, yeah, this back and forth. And but anyway, that is the point of that, is that's what it comes down to, is when you work with a crappy contractor, it's just a constant game of what is the minimum they can possibly do to get you to pay them in advance, and can they wear you down to finally pay them. And man, that gets tiring. And I did that for many years. And that is like probably what made me harsh about some of these things. And I guess between that and all the stories that I've told you on this podcast, yeah, it made me mean and calculated. I created my systems, and I was going to hold people accountable no matter what. I made this system, which hopefully you guys have seen by now. If not, go to the website and check it out. I put all the courses out there and all the content for free, so you guys can start building a foundation of knowledge and have something that you can actually go out there and use. But anyway, so I created all of that. Of course, it's evolved since then, and it's still evolving. But basically, I needed a system of checks and balances, and a system to be able to set very detailed expectations for these people, a way to prove that they had agreed upon it, and truly a way to work pricing and all that kind of stuff. And then um, because of all these experiences, it was like, all right, I was going to get all that, and then I was going to grab my hammer and I was going to beat down whoever didn't do what we had agreed upon. I was going to hold ruthless accountability, and I did that for years, really. And I'm not saying that I don't still do that, but I do that with the contractors that are crappy, and there's still a lot of them out there. And sometimes you use them, sometimes you accidentally run into them, or sometimes you're using them, and you need to make sure that you set things up in a way that you can have ground to stand on. But that is not the best way. So later on in my uh, career, after creating these systems and using them for quite a while, not making a lot of friends doing it, I ran into a guy that used to work with me in what I call the grower days, and so he was actually worked on staff at the time, but he had gone and started his own contracting business since. And I hadn't really talked to him for a while. It'd been quite a while. And, he told me what he was doing. And so I tried him out on this project or, a project. And man, it was way different. This dude gets it. He understood what I wanted as an investor. He didn't want to just meet expectations. He didn't want to just clean his room. He wanted to go above and beyond. Like he actually wanted to be good. But, like the problem with the craftsmen, for instance, good to them meant, having like a perfectly chiseled fireplace mantle, high craftsmanship. Whereas he understood that good meant a profitable project. And profitable for us is not about high craftsmanship. Certainly, it is about doing things the right way, but not overdoing them. It is about making a project that sells well. It's about, quality equates to consistency, having a consistent product, knowing what it's going to look like when it's all done. And he understood that. He understood that you know, uh, all boats rise in the rising tide. Is that how the quote goes? But basically, that if I was making money as an investor, that would be good for him because he was able to see the bigger picture that, he, instead of focusing on like high end renovations, like a lot of contractors do, where you might get big rips on one project, but they're harder to come by and you got to deal with a lot more BS. He knew that he could uh, work with an investor who was going to keep buying more and more houses, and there would be an endless flow of projects, which he could build a business off of the back of. And that, you know, yeah, maybe each job is a little bit, he gets a little bit less profit from each job, but they can be never ending. And he didn't have to put any bandwidth into dealing with a customer who needed to go back and forth about certain materials and so on and so forth. And so you know I worked with this guy and it was great. We would really understood each other, got aligned, and I used him as the one example. There are quite a few more, so if anybody's listening to this who I work with, I can promise you, if we're working together at this point, it's um because I think that you're good at what you do. And that is what I believe all of the investors who are listening to this should strive for, is to keep honing in on finding the good contractor, the best contractor. So just to reiterate what the best contractor means, it's they understand business. So if you're making money investing, then everybody's making money. And in the real estate game, quality means consistency, not necessarily craftsmanship. Two, they're long term, big picture focused. So investor grade rehabs may have downsides, but the huge upside is that the jobs just keep on coming if the investor is successful. Therefore, it is in your best interest or their best interest to help the investor be successful. Three, skills. They aren't newbies. They know the trades and have experience working them and working with other contractors on projects. That's a big one because a lot of these guys turn into crybabies when somebody else is on the project, which I always try to not have a bunch of people on the project because then there's always uh, fingers, somebody to point a finger at when whatever happens on the project, something goes wrong or somebody leaves their trash. It was always the other guy's fault. And so I try to keep to one contractor at a time on a project, but whatever, some things come up. Four, they are leaders. So they have a crew that is bought in. They care deeply about that crew, and they know how to manage that crew effectively. This is a big one. The crew is made up of their family or close friends, mostly their family. This helps reinforce their leadership. But I'm telling you, it's just the way it goes that go back to my grower days where you're trying to manage these guys and just everybody's going off in different places. And, truly maybe that's a reflection of my leadership. I don't know. But what I have definitely experienced is these guys who are working with their family. That's the crew that they have. Man, they are just so much better. They have a lot more trust and alignment. They don't have to deal with the BS that you deal with in the construction game of people stealing things, not showing up to work, because they really care about each other. Now, that could extend to close friends that really care about each other. I have also seen that. So here's the overarching point here, that you can certainly create and utilize systems of hardcore management that help you keep things in a line. And truly, in my experience, you can really do that. The problem is that you have to keep your foot on the gas all the time. So I would spend all my time going to these job sites. I remember I'd wake up and I'd have alarms set for different contractors because I knew when they'd get up and start working. And so that's the first call I could have. I mean, I would just be on the phone. I would be checking up on everybody. Hey, just making sure, I'd be nice about it. Hey, making sure that you're going to still set to do the blah, blah, blah at this project today. And, even if they didn't have something to do that day, hey, just seeing how you're doing, man, like have normal conversations with them. I had a whole list of the people that I needed to talk to and what time I could talk to them and what I was going to talk to them about to keep them closely wrapped in. And I would get results. Truly, I would get results when things didn't work right. No problem with hard conversations, going in there and saying, I'm sorry, man, I'm not going to pay you until you do these things. This is what we agreed upon. Here's the text message in which we agreed upon. Here's the video of us walking through the property. You said you were going to do it. Now you're going to do it. Or I'm not paying until you do it. But by the way, as soon as you're done, I will pay you quickly. I will go out of my way to drive a check over. And I'm serious about that. That's the way you should be as well. Okay, that is so much bandwidth, though. And so, if you're going to be doing that all the time, yes, you'll get the results that you want, but will you be able to do the other things that matter, probably matter more in the real estate game, like finding better deals, making better scopes of work, like building your business, or most importantly yet, spending time with your family or friends or other loved ones. So that's what we're trying to do, is buy back bandwidth through skills. And so what the best contractors do for you is they allow you to focus on, instead of all of the details of what they're doing every day, and focus on all the tactics to keep them under your thumb. What you can do instead is focus on genuinely building a better relationship with them. And by just doing that, you'll get all of the other things that you want because they're actually good at what they want to do and they actually care. And more than just the actual extrinsic value you get of more profitable projects, a easier to run machine, easier to run organization, you actually get the intrinsic value of building great relationships with some of the best people you'll ever meet. These hardworking guys that are growing a business. I think about this guy that um, really I started this story about the best contractor in this podcast. And this guy came over here, and I'm certain that he is going to for generations after him, be like the picture above the mantelpiece where they think about him and the guy that came over here and set up that family for success, and he, did whatever it took to make it work. And he went through whatever sacrifices he went through. He gave the whole family jobs, and that's something that's a great thing to be a part of. And you could certainly do that if you get your mindset right. And I promise you, if you are working with those type of contractors, you will enjoy what you do a lot more, and it'll have a lot more meaning for you. That does not mean that you're not going to go through some of the bad ones, though. And you need to make sure that you have systems to keep those guys in check. All right. Thank you.